All right, hello. So what I'm gonna do here is go over some questions from kind of like review, some very foundational math type questions. Just to kind of, it's good to go back and review. Math is something that if we don't use particular concepts, we forget them. I'd still do it all the time if I haven't used something for a while. So I want to go over some of this, and I'm just going to get my little fancy light pointer thingy. We're just going to start number one. So sometimes two numbers are changed when rounding. And when does this occur? And so normally when we're doing rounding, we're just doing one number making a change. But if we have a 9, so let's use an example here of, say, like if we have 95 and the rule of rounding says if it's 5 or greater, we bump up the next number. So let's just say we're rounding to the tens place. So that means we're going to bump up 9 because we have 5 or greater in the space before. So 9 goes to 10, but really it goes to 1 or to 0. And the placeholder next to it goes to 1 because we're increasing two numbers because the place before would technically be a 0 when we have 95. So that's when it occurs, when we're rounding and the place value we're rounding is a 9 and it increases by 1. It's going to fall into the next number place, the next part of the period. So that's when it would increase by 2. So let's go ahead and do some rounding. Right here, we're going to round 2,406 to the nearest hundred. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our hundreds place, which is right here, the 4. So we're going to go to this number before to see if we're going to round up or round down. It's a 0 less than 5. So we're going to leave the 4 as it is. And we have 2,406. Super simple because we really didn't have to do anything. So now we're going to round 40,096 to the nearest 1,000. So same procedure. We're going to go to 1,000 place, which is the 0 here. We go to the number before, which is a 0, and just like the last time, it's below 5, so we're going to leave things alone so we don't do a thing. Yay. All right, so when we're rounding a number to the nearest place value, and the numbers to the right of the digit being rounded as 5, do you round up and down, up or down? And we just talked about it, 5 or greater, we're going to round up. And so let's go here. What does the associative property of addition state? And give an example. All right, there's these rules, and they have fancy names, and they have fancy definitions. And you probably already know them. You just don't know them in their fancy form. So what the associative property of addition says is that if we have numbers, and when we see them, they're in these lovely little quantities, and that's what we said it is inside of parentheses, that we can switch around those parentheses and it doesn't matter. We're still going to get the same number. Now, this is only with addition, but we can switch those around and it's going to come up to be the same number. So we associate different things with those. So 5 plus 1, 6 plus 1 is 7. 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 5 is 7. So it doesn't matter when we're adding how we switch around those parentheses. And like what I'm actually doing right now is I'm double checking because I pulled it up on Google because I'm correct. Changing the grouping does not matter. And I know that But again, kind of going back to the definitions and all that good stuff, like that doesn't really come into practice when I'm actually doing it. But I guarantee you that's always going to forever and a day in math classes pop up on tests and quizzes and whatnot, including with us. So it's just something to know. I suggest if you go look up properties of addition, there's 4 of them. Just print it out, have it as a note. So if we move on to the next one, we have something called the addition property of 0. And so what that is, and let me just move this one down so it's with the correct question. So the additive property of 0 simply says that if we add anything by 0, it stays 0. Or we don't add anything to it. So for example, 5 plus 0 is 5. Like nothing happens when we add by 0. So that's what that one says. Now the next question is kind of interesting. So explain the process of adding whole numbers with several digits. And the reason this is interesting is because sometimes we do get into a habit of we know how to do the quick addition. There's actually a lot of complicated math behind it. We're not going to go into that. It's kind of cool, kind of not. But so I'd have to say for me, it's really important because I have to remember how to explain to do this stuff to people who are having difficulty with it. So let's just say we're adding 2 numbers here, 45 and 11. When I'm doing it, I like to set it up vertically, up and down. And if you do get a question like this where it says explain the process of, I just suggest doing it and talking and saying everything you're doing as you go through it. So I'm going to start on the right-hand side. I'm going to go top to bottom, and I'm going to add those numbers. So I'm going to add the 5 and the 1, which is 6, right? And then I'm going to add 4 and 1, which is 5. So I add the vertical columns together. Now I know, and we kind of talked about this in rounding, that there's also an extra principle that says, let's make this a higher, let's make this a 9. So if I go ahead and take my vertical columns, 9 plus 1 is 10. So I just leave the 0 and I carry the 1 up here. And I add it to the number there, which is, so 4 plus 1 is 5. 5 plus 1 is 60. And then I continue going down the vertical column, adding. So I end up with 60. And that's how you would add whole numbers with several digits. And we could keep expanding it out, but that's the basic process. You would just keep on following that. And if you do run into that 9, you carry the numbers over and add it to the first one. So here's those additive properties again. Now there's actually 2 things going on in this one. There's the associative property, the associative property, which we talked about before, because we are switching the numbers or the parentheses, but it doesn't affect it when we're just adding. The other thing that's coming on is the commutative property, and the commutative property says we can change the order of things when we're adding, and it does not matter. So 1 plus 2 is the same as 2 plus 1. They're both 3. So it doesn't matter when we're adding. And I had to look up the name of it because I don't really call these. I know what to do. I just don't call them by name. So totally a Google thing to find out the names. All right. So here's another example of just come on, add these things together, which we just described how to do it. Now it's in horizontal form. So I'm going to go ahead and put it vertically because I don't know. I think just because that's the way I was always taught. And so that's the way my brain works on it. Plus 460. And I'm just going to go down the vertical columns and add them up. So I'm going to start off with 6 plus 0, and 6 plus 0 is 6. And then 5 plus 6 is 11. So here's an example of what we do when we carry it over. I'm going to put the furthest right number down. and I'm going to add the 1 because it's going into the next place value. This 4 becomes a 5, and then I'm going to continue adding them down. 5 plus 4 is 9. And then there's nothing to add with the 2, so I'm just going to bring it down. And so now we have 2,916. And to kind of lead into the next question, like that looks about right. 4 plus 4 is usually about 800. We got some extra digits over here. So I would estimate what that is about 2,800, which is close to 2,916, which is what an estimation is. So an estimation is just a good guess, not a random wild guess, but a pretty good guess. Like if I were to ask you what's 193 plus 342, you'd know 300 and 100, that's about 400. So it's probably in the 400, 500 range. Just using a good estimation. So what are the synonyms for addition? And why is this important? So when we're doing word problems, knowing the different ways that people set up addition, we can recognize this addition in a word problem. So add, sum, total. Those are usually used for addition. So it's good to know that those words mean to add when we're working like a word problem. And then the last thing we're going to cover for today, find the sum of 3 and 8. So sum means addition. So it's simply 3 plus 8. And then I would use my fingers. 8, 9, 10, 11. 8 plus 3 is 11. Don't be afraid to use your fingers. I'm a professional accountant. I do it all the time. But that's just some of the basics I wanted to go over, some of the foundations. Hope this helped get through that first section of the homework. Have fun, enjoy, keep it mathy.